My son Tim stopped me at the hospital door after I'd driven 15 hours straight and said the words that would cost them everything. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Michelle said she doesn't want you around. 4 days later, when the hospital called asking how I'd like to pay the $12,000 delivery bill, I smiled for the first time since my grandson was born. I'm Ted Williams, 58 years old, and let me back up and explain how we got to this moment of karma. 3 weeks earlier, my daughter-in-law Michelle had called me practically glowing through the phone. "Dad, Ted, the baby's due any day now, and we'd love for you to be here when he arrives. You're going to be such an amazing grandfather." I should have known something was off when she started calling me Dad Ted instead of just Ted. After 5 years of marriage to my son Tim, she'd never been that warm. But the excitement of becoming a grandfather for the first time clouded my judgment. At 58, I'd been dreaming of this moment since Tim announced the pregnancy 8 months ago. I live in Phoenix. They live in Denver. 15 hours of desert highways and mountain passes. I packed my best clothes, bought gifts for the baby, and even splurged on a week at a nice hotel near the hospital. This was going to be the most important week of my life. The drive itself was brutal. My back ached from sitting so long, but every mile brought me closer to meeting my grandson. I stopped only for gas and coffee, calling Tim twice to check if there was any news. Both times, Michelle answered his phone, sweet as pie, telling me to drive safely and that they couldn't wait to see me. When I finally pulled into the hospital parking garage at 2 a.m. on Tuesday morning, exhausted but excited, I felt like I'd conquered the world. The maternity ward receptionist told me Michelle was in labor. Room 314. I practically floated down the hallway, my heart pounding with anticipation. That's when I found Tim pacing outside the delivery room, looking more stressed than excited. The moment he saw me, his face changed. Not relief, not joy, something closer to panic. "Dad, what are you doing here?" The question hit me like a slap. "What do you mean?" Michelle invited me. She called and said, "You wanted me here for the birth." Tim's eyes darted toward the delivery room door, then back to me. He looked like a man caught between two impossible choices. She changed her mind about having family here. She wants it to be just us. But I drove 15 hours, Tim. I'm here now. I'm not asking to be in the delivery room, just to be nearby when my grandson arrives. I know, Dad, but Michelle's really adamant about this. You know how emotional she gets, and the doctor said stress could complicate the delivery. Something in his voice told me this wasn't Michelle's sudden change of heart. This felt planned, orchestrated, but I was too tired and too shocked to fight in a hospital corridor. "Fine," I said quietly. "I'll go to my hotel and wait for your call." Tim looked relieved, which only confirmed my suspicion that I was being deliberately pushed out. "Thanks, Dad. I'll call you as soon as the baby's born." I spent the next 8 hours in my hotel room, checking my phone every 10 minutes. When Tim finally called at 10 a.m. Wednesday morning, his voice was exhausted, but happy. "Dad, Hez here. Benjamin Timothy Williams, 7 pounds 2 ounces. He's perfect. Congratulations, son. When can I meet him?" Another pause. "Michelle's really tired, Dad. The delivery was rough. Maybe give us a day or two to settle in." I felt like I was begging for scraps from my own family. "Tim, I'm his grandfather. I drove 15 hours to be here. I know, and we appreciate that. But Michelle needs to recover. You understand, right?" No, I didn't understand. But I agreed, because what choice did I have? I spent 2 more days in that hotel room, ordering room service and watching terrible daytime television while my son and his wife bonded with my grandson in a hospital 3 miles away. Friday morning came and went with no call. I finally drove to the hospital myself, determined to at least see my grandson through the nursery window. That's when I discovered they'd already been discharged. I called Tim immediately. "You took the baby home without even telling me." "Dad, Michelle wanted to get home to her own space. She's been really anxious about germs and visitors." "I'm not a visitor, Tim. I'm your father. I'm Benjamin's grandfather. I know that. Look, maybe next month when things settle down. Next month. I'd driven 15 hours to see my grandson next month." That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I hung up, packed my bags, and drove back to Phoenix. If they wanted to exclude me from Benjamin's birth, fine. But they'd learn that actions have consequences. Sunday afternoon, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Denver General Hospital. "Is this Ted Williams?" "Yes, ma'am. We have some paperwork issues regarding the birth of Benjamin Timothy Williams. The insurance claim was denied, and we need to discuss payment arrangements for the delivery bill." My heart started pounding, but not with anxiety, with something much more satisfying. "I'm sorry, but I think there's been some confusion. I'm not responsible for that bill. Our records show you as the financial guarantor for Michelle Williams' delivery." And that's when I realized exactly what my dear daughter-in-law had done while I was driving across 2 states to be there for my grandson's birth. Mom, according to our records, you signed financial responsibility forms for Mrs. Michelle Williams' delivery. I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair, my mind racing. When exactly was this form signed? Let me check. It shows here that the forms were submitted electronically on November 15th at 11:47 p.m., November 15th, the night I was driving through the middle of nowhere, Utah, probably around the time I stopped for gas near Salt Lake City. I'd been on the road for 8 hours, exhausted and focused on getting to Denver safely. And how exactly were these forms submitted? Electronically through our patient portal. The signature appears to be yours, Mr. Williams. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. While I was white-knuckling it through a snowstorm on I-70, desperate to reach Denver before my grandson was born, Michelle was forging my signature on financial documents. I need to see these forms. Can you email them to me? Certainly. What email address should I use? 20 minutes later, I was staring at documents that made my blood boil. Not only had Michelle forged my signature, but she had also somehow obtained my social security number, address, and financial information. The forms clearly stated that as the paternal grandfather, I was requesting to pay all expenses as a gift to the new family. But the most infuriating part was the timing. These forms were submitted while Michelle was sweet-talking me on the phone about being there for the birth, knowing full well that she planned to stick me with the bill while excluding me from actually seeing my grandson. I called the hospital back. This is Ted Williams. I just reviewed the financial responsibility forms and I need to report fraud. Fraud, sir? First, I never signed these documents. Second, these were submitted without my knowledge or consent while I was driving to Denver at my daughter-in-law's invitation. I have GPS records and gas receipts proving I was in Utah when these forms were supposedly signed in Colorado. The billing representative's tone changed immediately. Sir, if you're alleging fraud, I need to transfer you to our legal department. Perfect. While I waited on hold, I pulled out my phone and started documenting everything. Screenshots of Michelle's texts inviting me to Denver, call logs showing when she contacted me, even photos I'd taken during my drive with timestamps proving where I was when the forms were supposedly signed. Mr. Williams, this is legal department. I understand you're disputing financial responsibility forms. I'm not disputing them. I'm reporting identity theft and fraud. I have evidence that these documents were forged. For the next hour, I provided the legal department with every detail of Michelle's deception. They were particularly interested in the fact that Michelle had invited me to Denver while simultaneously committing fraud in my name. Mr. Williams, this is indeed a serious matter. We'll be filing a police report and turning this over to our fraud investigation team. In the meantime, all charges to your name are suspended pending investigation. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen staring at my phone. Michelle had played this perfectly. She'd gotten me out of the way during the birth, had her private family moment, and planned to stick me with a $12,000 bill as a final insult. What she didn't know was that I'd spent 35 years as a medical billing administrator before retiring. I knew exactly how hospital fraud investigations worked, and I knew Michelle had just committed several felonies. My phone buzzed with a text from Tim. Dad, hope you made it home safely. Michelle's doing great and Benjamin is such a good baby. We'll send pictures soon. Pictures. After excluding me from his birth and forging financial documents in my name, they thought pictures would smooth things over. I typed back, glad everyone's healthy, looking forward to meeting him soon. What I didn't mention was that ID just spent the afternoon ensuring that Michelle's fraud would be thoroughly investigated by both the hospital and local law enforcement. Tuesday morning brought another call from Denver General. Mr. Williams, this is Detective Stephen Bailey with the Denver Police Department. We've been assigned to investigate the fraud case you reported, of course. Can you walk me through the timeline of events leading up to the alleged document forgery? For the next 45 minutes, I provided Detective Bailey with a detailed account of everything that had happened. Michelle's invitation, the 15-hour drive being turned away at the hospital, the subsequent exclusion from seeing my grandson, and finally discovering the fraudulent financial responsibility forms. Mr. Williams, do you have any documentation supporting your version of events? I have text messages, call logs, photos from my drive with GPS timestamps, and hotel receipts proving I was traveling when the forms were allegedly signed by me. Well, need copies of all of that. This is shaping up to be a clear case of identity theft and fraud. The fact that the perpetrator invited you to travel while committing crimes in your name suggests premeditation. Michelle had just made a desperate decision in the moment. She'd planned this entire scenario. The invitation, the exclusion, the fraud, all of it had been calculated to humiliate me while sticking me with their medical bills. Detective, what happens next? We'll be obtaining warrants for financial records, hospital surveillance footage, and digital evidence from the submission of these fraudulent forms. If our investigation confirms what you've told me, your daughter-in-law will be facing several felony charges. My doorbell rang that afternoon. Through the peephole, I could see a woman in her 30s holding a manila envelope. Ted Williams? Yes. I'm Sarah Collins, investigator with Denver General Hospital's Fraud Prevention Department. I have some documents for you to review. She handed me the envelope and waited while I opened it. Inside were printed copies of security footage from the night the fraudulent forms were submitted. The screenshots showed Michelle at a computer in the hospital's family lounge typing on their patient portal system. Mr. Williams, these images were captured at 11:52 p.m. on November 15th, approximately 5 minutes after the financial responsibility forms were submitted under your name. There was Michelle, clear as day, hunched over a laptop in the hospital's waiting area. The timestamp showed I was still 4 hours away from Denver, somewhere in the Utah mountains with no cell service. What happens now? I asked. The evidence is overwhelming. Hospital fraud is a federal offense when it involves identity theft across state lines. Your daughter-in-law is looking at significant jail time and financial penalties. As Sarah Collins drove away, I sat on my front porch watching the Arizona sunset and thinking about how drastically everything had changed. A week ago, I'd been a grandfather driving across the country to welcome my first grandson. Now I was a victim of identity theft with my daughter-in-law facing federal charges. My phone rang. Tim's name appeared on the screen. Dad, what the hell did you do? Tim's voice was shaking with anger, but underneath I heard something else. Fear. Hello to you too, Tim. I'm doing fine. Thanks for asking. Don't play games with me. The police showed up at our house this morning with a warrant. Michelle's been arrested for fraud. They said you pressed charges. I settled back in my porch chair, watching a roadrunner dart across my front yard. I didn't press charges, Tim. I simply reported identity theft when the hospital called asking how I wanted to pay Michelle's delivery bill. Silence on the other end. Then quietly, what delivery bill? The $12,000 bill for Benjamin's birth that your wife stuck me with while you two were playing happy family without me. That's impossible. Our insurance covered everything. Poor Tim, still so naive about the woman Head married. Your insurance was denied, son. That's why the hospital called me. Apparently, Michelle made me financially responsible for her delivery while I was driving through Utah to see my grandson, who I was then not allowed to meet. Another long silence. I could practically hear the pieces clicking together in his mind. Dad, there has to be some explanation. Michelle wouldn't do something like that, wouldn't she? The same woman who invited me to drive 15 hours for the birth, then had you turn me away at the hospital door? The same woman who's avoided every one of my calls for the past week. She's been recovering from childbirth. Tim, she forged my signature on legal documents. There's security footage of her doing it. This isn't a misunderstanding. I heard Michelle's voice in the background, shrill and panicked. Tim covered the phone, but I could make out fragments of their conversation. Michelle claiming it was all a mistake, that she'd only put my name down as emergency contact, that she never meant for me to be responsible for the bills. Dad, Tim came back on the line. Michelle says this is all a misunderstanding. She put you down as emergency contact, not financial guarantor. Tim, I've seen the documents. I was a medical billing administrator for 35 years. I know the difference between an emergency contact form and a financial responsibility agreement. Your wife committed fraud. Jesus Christ. His voice cracked. Dad, what happens now? That depends on Michelle. The detective told me that if she makes full restitution and admits responsibility, they might consider reduced charges. But Tim, she didn't just steal from me. She humiliated me. She made me drive across 2 states to be rejected at my own grandson's birth, then tried to stick me with the bill for the privilege. I could hear Benjamin crying in the background and my heart clenched. This should have been such a happy time. My first grandson, healthy and perfect, and instead I was discussing felony charges with his father. What do you want me to do? Tim asked finally. I want you to be honest with me about what really happened. Did Michelle plan to exclude me from the birth from the beginning? Another pause. Then so quietly I almost didn't hear it. Yes, the confirmation hit harder than I'd expected, even though I'd known it was true. Why? She said having you there would be stressful, that she wanted the birth to be just our immediate family. I am immediate family, Tim. I'm your father. I'm Benjamin's grandfather. I know. I should have stood up to her. I should have told you what she was planning instead of letting you drive all that way. Yes, you should have, but you chose to protect her feelings instead of mine, and now she's facing federal charges because neither of you thought about consequences. The investigation that followed revealed something far worse than I'd imagined. FBI agent Sarah Collins called me 2 weeks later with news that made my blood run cold. Mr. Williams, we've discovered that Michelle Williams isn't who she claims to be. Her real name is Sandra Mitchell, and she has a criminal record in 3 states for identity theft and fraud. What do you mean? She's been living under multiple false identities for the past 8 years. She's married to another man, Jeremy Anderson, who's also a career criminal. They've been running family infiltration schemes across the western states. Family infiltration schemes. My daughter-in-law wasn't just a desperate new mother who'd made poor decisions. She was a professional criminal who'd targeted my family as part of a larger operation. Agent Collins, what does this mean for my son and grandson? It means Tim's marriage is fraudulent, and Sandra Mitchell has been planning to disappear with Benjamin and demand ransom money from your family. We found detailed plans in Jeremy Anderson's apartment when we arrested him in Seattle. Ransom money, they'd planned to kidnap my grandson and hold him for money. How much were they planning to demand? $500,000. They'd researched your assets, your property values, your retirement accounts. They knew exactly how much they thought you could pay. As Agent Collins explained the full scope of Sandra's crimes, I realized that my refusal to pay that hospital bill had saved not just my money, but possibly my grandson's life. If I'd quietly paid the $12,000 and stayed silent, Sandra would have proceeded with her plan to stage her own death and Benjamin's death, then disappear with Jeremy and my grandson. The trial began 6 months later when Sandra Mitchell took the witness stand. She finally dropped her mask of innocence. You people thought you were so smart, she told the courtroom looking directly at me, but you were just marks, easy targets who deserved what happened to them. The jury convicted her on all counts of identity theft, fraud, conspiracy, and kidnapping conspiracy. Judge Morrison sentenced her to 15 years in federal prison. As we left the courthouse, Tim carrying Benjamin against his chest, I realized that Sandra's plan had backfired completely. She'd tried to destroy our family, but her crimes had actually brought Tim and me closer together than we'd been in years. Dad, Tim said as we walked to the car, I don't know how to thank you for what? For refusing to let her get away with it. If you'd just paid that hospital bill and stayed quiet, Benjamin and I would probably be her victims forever while she planned worse crimes. I looked at my grandson, sleeping peacefully in his father's arms, completely unaware that his mother had planned to kidnap him and raise him to be a criminal. Tim, the only thing Sandra was wrong about is thinking it'd be an easy target. She was wrong about something else too. What's that? She thought experience made me weak, but experience taught me exactly how to fight back. The drive back to Phoenix that day was different from my desperate journey 6 months earlier. This time, Tim sat in the passenger seat while Benjamin slept in his car seat behind us. We had a lot to figure out: living arrangements, legal paperwork to establish Tim's sole custody, therapy for Tim to process the trauma of discovering his entire marriage had been a lie. Dad, Tim said as we crossed into Arizona, I need to ask you something. What's that? Can Benjamin and I stay with you for a while? I know it's a lot to ask, but I need time to figure things out. The house in Denver has too many memories of her lies. Son, you and Benjamin are welcome for as long as you need. That guest room has been empty too long anyway. Tim was quiet for several miles. Then, I keep thinking about all the times she talked about her childhood, her family, her college years. Every story was a lie. I don't even know if she actually loved Benjamin or if he was just part of her scheme. Tim, whatever Sandra's motivations were, Benjamin is here now and he's safe. That's what matters. But what do I tell him when he's older? How do I explain that his mother was a criminal who planned to kidnap him? I thought about that for a long time before answering. You tell him the truth, that his grandfather loved him enough to fight for him when bad people tried to hurt your family, that sometimes doing the right thing means making hard choices, and that he'll always be safe because he has people who really love him. The first few weeks of our new living arrangement took some adjustment. Tim had to learn how to be a single father while dealing with the legal aftermath of Sandra's crimes. There were depositions, insurance claims, and the complicated process of legally establishing that Benjamin was his son despite the fraudulent circumstances of his birth. I found myself falling into the rhythm of being a hands-on grandfather in ways I'd never expected. Getting up for 2 a.m. feedings when Tim was exhausted. Teaching Benjamin to smile, to laugh, to reach for toys. The simple joy of watching my grandson discover the world around him. Tim started seeing a therapist. Dr. Amanda Taylor recommended to help him process the trauma of discovering his entire marriage had been built on lies. It took months for him to stop questioning every memory, every conversation, every moment of happiness he'd shared with Sandra. The hardest part, he told me one evening as we sat on the back patio watching Benjamin play in his bouncy seat, is wondering if I can ever trust my judgment again. How did I live with someone for 5 years and not know who she really was? Tim, she was a professional. This is what she did for a living. You weren't naive, you were normal. Normal people don't expect the person they marry to be running a criminal operation. Agent Collins kept us updated on the broader investigation into Jeremy Anderson's network. That identified at least 12 women across 8 states who'd been working similar schemes. Sandra's conviction had been the break they needed to unravel the entire operation. Your case was unique, Agent Collins told us during one of her updates. Most of their victims never fought back. They either paid the fraudulent bills to avoid family drama, or they were too embarrassed to report being scammed by family members. Your decision to investigate and fight back saved not just your family, but probably dozens of other families. 6 months after Sandra's sentencing, Tim got a job offer from a tech company in Phoenix. Dad, I could keep looking for something in Denver, but honestly, I like our setup here. Benjamin loves having his grandfather around, and I've never felt more supported. What are you saying? I'm saying if you're willing, I'd like to make this permanent. We could find a bigger place, somewhere with room for all of us. I looked at Benjamin, now 8 months old and babbling happily in his high chair, tiny hands grabbing at everything in reach. This wasn't how I'd imagined becoming a grandfather, but it had turned out better than any plan I could have made. Tim, there's nothing I'd like more. We found a house with a big backyard and an office where I could work part-time consulting on medical billing fraud cases. Apparently, my experience with Sandra's scheme had given me some expertise that hospitals valued. Tim set up a home office where he could work remotely when Benjamin was napping. A year after Sandra's conviction, Benjamin took his first steps across our living room from Tim's outstretched arms to mine. As I caught my grandson and lifted him up, both of us laughing, I realized that Sandra Mitchell had given me something Shed never intended to give. Shed given me the chance to be the kind of grandfather I'd always wanted to be. Not just someone who visited on holidays or sent birthday cards, but someone who was there for the daily moments that really matter. First words, first steps, bedtime stories, and morning cartoons. Now Benjamin is 2 years old, and he calls me Grandpa Ted. When people ask about his mother, I tell them she's not in the picture, and most people are polite enough not to push for details. Benjamin knows he's loved by his dad and his grandpa, and for now, that's enough. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd just paid that $12,000 hospital bill and stayed quiet. Sandra would have proceeded with her plan. Benjamin would have disappeared. Tim would have spent the rest of his life grieving for a wife and child who weren't really dead. Instead, we're building something real. A family based on truth instead of lies, on love instead of manipulation, on protecting each other instead of exploiting each other. And if another predator ever targets my family, they'll learn the same lesson Sandra learned. Some grandfathers are too smart, too stubborn, and too experienced to be easy victims. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong in family relationships. Criminals count on family loyalty to silence their victims. But real family protects each other from harm, not from consequences. The experience and wisdom you've earned over decades isn't weakness. It's your strongest weapon against those who think age makes you an easy target.